Indian history has several examples of devotees sharing a deep personal relationship with their deities, right? Like, for
Yes.
example, Mirabai,
Yes.
Bhakt Ramdas.
Yes.
And I think even King Ravan
Mm-hmm.
was shared a personal relationship with Shiva,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And like you said, yeah, they've produced beautiful poetry that are still heard to today
Very true. Very
in
true.
after all these centuries.
Very true.
So I think through their poetry, they express the deep bond that they shared with their deities,
Very,
like you mentioned.
very true. Whether we're talking about Andal, we're going back to, we don't even know what time frame she lived, but in a very, very early time frame, Andal in Tamil Nadu, or whether you're talking about Tukaram or Kabir Das or Mirabai or others in the northern part of India, every part of India we have had bhakti practitioners who have expressed their love for their Ishta Devatas and have left us such beautiful and rich expressions of that love that we sing even today.
In fact, I find that when I contrast this personal relationship that Hinduism, the Hindu devotees have shared with their deities, with that of Christianity or even Judaism, um, I feel the Hindu concept of personal relationship is much more defined than that of Christianity. Christian personal relationship is on the superficial level, I feel. And also we have, like you already mentioned, I'm just reiterating to make a point. We have both Ishta Devata and the Grama Devata.
Yes.
So the Grama Devata is something that a tribe or a clan chooses, and then they start worshipping that deity and start sacrificing to it. And Ishta Devata is much more personal.
Right.
So it's at the individual level. And the concept of Grama Devata is what the pagan Mediterraneans followed. So they picked up a deity for their nation or race from the ancient Near Eastern pantheon of gods and goddesses.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked up to it, they offered sacrifices, and they feared it. So they believed that this deity had a personal relationship with the nation, guiding it, monitoring it, awarding punishments, and favoring them. And this deity was something that engaged in the personal, day-to-day political and administrative affairs of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And the Israelites, who shared space, the geographic space with the pagan Mediterraneans, borrowed this concept from the pagans of Kula Devata, and that is how they chose Yahweh, Jehovah, as their personal deity from the same pantheon
I see. Mm-hmm.
of pagan gods and goddesses of the Mediterranean. Later, the Christians incorporated that concept of that personal deity concept into their religion and their beliefs. So this is why I say that, it has been borrowed and then it evolved into what it is today in terms of the personal relationship with Jesus.
Excellent.
Which is
Excellent.
why I say that it is at a superficial level, and the Hindu concept of the personal relationship with their deity is much more defined, complex, and evolved, and makes much more sense.
Very true. I loved everything that you said over there because it ties in well with the history of religion. If one studies the history of religion, we see how the Jews were during the tribal phase and during their early kingdoms phase, monarchies, and later Judaism. We see such evolutions of thoughts going there. Even in the early books of Genesis, there are references to other peoples, other gods, and so on, which clearly shows that there were several out of which they selected one. It is certainly interesting to see the evolution of religion over there and tie it with two or three things. One of them is with the genetic understanding of outflows from India, the Y chromosome as well as the maternal mitochondrial DNA. Both of them talk about migrations out of India. Once these early lineages came into India, We know that 30,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, there were out of India migrations to other parts of the world. And we can try to see when did early religious thought also happen in India by trying to see what do we know from Sumerian times at least onwards when they talk about Marduk, when they talk about other kind of divinities in their cultures. We can try to see the evolution of the thoughts over there and how from such a evolution of this derogatorily called pagan ideas came the idea of monotheistic God in Judaism, as well as what happened in Christianity and later Islam. So it's amazing to see that. And India, we know very well how these notions of Vedanta came about, how the early ideas from the Vedas, how these notions were deeply embedded. And later commentators meaning people, the people who wrote the Upanishads, Aranyakas, Brahmanas, they were trying to interpret what the Vedas were, and it is in that context that we see notion of Nirguna, Saguna, Brahman, all these things come. So in India, we can see the historical evolution clearly that shows these things. We can tie it in with the remaining parts of the world by tying it up with known notions from genetics, archaeology, the philosophy, and the similarities of practices. We can try to see how early religion evolved in these places. So when
Right,
somebody
right.
comes and takes these spot shots, they need to first understand the history of religion, at least do a religion 101 course. Even if it is
Correct,
offered by a
correct.
Western university, do that. And then try to understand more about Indian thought, not from Western records, but from Indian understanding. Try to
True.
understand Indian history, and one would see these things very, very clearly.
So Raj, this is how I see it. Talking of Ishtadevata concept, nothing at all comes close to this concept of that concept of devotee sharing a personal relationship with God. The Hindu Ishtadevata concept is, as I said, much more defined. Yet here we have people that are converting to Christianity only because, as Hindus, they could not have a personal relationship with God. What a sad situation.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's total ignorance, total, utter, base level ignorance of their own knowledge systems. So when people use this as a reason for leaving, let me give an analogy over here, Esther. It is like somebody has $1 million check, okay, a check where somebody's written, I give this person $1 million. And they don't understand the value. It's a piece of paper, man. What is this? A piece of paper it means nothing. The ignorance is that high. And there's some huckster comes over there and gives them a couple of shiny 1 rupee coins, saying, "Hey, I'll give you these shiny metallic coins in exchange for that paper. Do you want to make a fair exchange?" They say, "Yeah, yeah, yes, I'll exchange it. Here you go. Here is your $1 million, and here is my the two shiny coins." And you go about announcing to the world proudly, "I got two shiny coins over here," without
And I
understanding.
traded it for a piece of paper written,
Yes, I exchanged it for
$1
the piece
million
of
on
paper
it.
without understanding in the least bit what that piece of paper is. Now, I'm not trying to equate Hinduism with $1 million. I'm not saying it's something pecuniary or any such thing. But the
Right,
point
right.
is, as an analogy, this person has got no idea, utterly no idea. She is the base level, maybe even below the base level, if you will, because she has inherited this deracination, this atrocity literature. She's looking at her own culture through the eyes of the missionaries who wanted to look at this in a certain way. She's made no attempt to try to get
Correct.
knowledge and what is this all about? Not at all, not at all. So this,
And this is the story of every convert.
right, story of every convert. They easily part with this rich, powerful understanding of reality and how to live life in exchange for some unverifiable truth claims about what reality is. It is very, very
Correct.
sad,
Correct.
very sad.
So the next statement that we are analyzing is,
When I was a Hindu, I used to call the names of 1,000 gods, almost 33 crores gods I was worshipping. But no God did I have a personal relationship like how I have with my Jesus. I got to know only this Jesus wants me to have a personal relationship with me. No other God can do that.
the 33 crore gods and goddesses in Hinduism. Where did that come from?
Okay. So I don't know where that 33 crore came, but there are many ways of looking at it. And I think one of the nicest things that I've liked is from an ancient book called Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. This was written by Rishi Yajnavalkya, who lived perhaps around 3000 BCE. How do we know that? Because of the astronomy contained in Shatapatha Brahmana, which is also another text that Rishi Yajnavalkya wrote. So in that, there's an interlocutor, and that person is somebody called Sakalya, the son of Sakalya. So Sakalya goes to Rishi Yajnavalkya and says, Yajnavalkya, how many gods are there? Yajnavalkya replies, 3,333. Sakalya pauses and asks, okay, how many gods are there, Yajnavalkya? He asks again. Yajnavalkya now says, there are 33 gods. Again, Sakalya asks, how many gods are there, Sakalya? Yajnavalkya says, there are 6 gods. Again, how many gods are there, Yajnavalkya? He says, there are 3 gods. Again, he asks, how many gods are there, Yajnavalkya? He says, there are 2 gods. Again, he asks him, Sakalya asks him, how many gods are there, Yajnavalkya? Yajnavalkya says, there is 1 God, and that is Brahman. So this very nicely shows in a syncretic sense how all the notions that we have of Saguna Brahman, everything is tied as expressions of one Brahman. This is what he says. So starting when he says there are 33 gods, he's basically referring to 8 Vasus, there are 12 Adityas, 11 Rudras, Indra, Prajapati, all of them combine and make 33. When he says 6 gods, he's referring to the elements, fire, earth, sky, and all these things. When he's talking about 3 gods, he's talking about the words, 3 words. When he's talking about 2 gods, he's talking about Purusha and Prakriti. This is the Hindu understanding of creation, coming out of the union of Purusha and Prakriti. He's talking about 1 God. This is the ultimate reality. Ultimate reality is there is 1 Brahman. So this is a beautiful text that clearly expounds the notion of Advaita, that is talking about everything is part of one permanent reality called Brahman, and everything else is an expression of that Brahman. So somebody who understands this would never make such an ignorant statement about 33 crore gods and all these things. And even otherwise, let's look at it from a philosophical point of view. If we think the population of Earth that time is 33 crores, the Hindu understanding is we are all part of Brahman. We are all born divine. It's not the Abrahamic thinking you're all born sinners, fallen and sinners. It is that we are all born divine because we are part of Brahman. That is the thinking. So 33 crore gods means everybody has got divinity in them. Everybody is part of the divinity. Only we don't understand it because of our ego and separation that we have induced with our false identifications. This is what it is. So whether one says 33 crore gods or 1 God, Hinduism can perfectly well accommodate both because we understand the philosophical ramifications of both statements. But the reality is there is Brahman. Brahman pervades all, and any form that you take, whether it is in the form of Bhagavan, Ishvara, or any Devi or Shakti and anything, is part of the same Brahman. That is the idea. So it is exceedingly shallow for somebody to come and say Hinduism has got 33 crore gods and I can't deal with it. I can't remember 33 crore names. So we'll go and take some other system of thinking. Very, very shallow, very shallow.
I think it's the deliberate mistranslation of the word, which is Trayas Trimsati Koti. So Trayas Trimsati is 33, and Koti actually means, I think, supreme, preeminent, or excellent.
Important, or so on. Yes.
Important.
Yes.
So it's 33, not crore, but Koti.
Yes.
Important beings.
Yes. And that time when Yajnavalkya was there, indeed, these were the divinities that I talked about in various Puranic texts and others, the Vasus, Adityas, Rudras, Brihaspati, Indra, and others. These are the ones talked about. So it makes perfect sense.
Right.
So
Right.
even if one takes the wrong meaning of Koti here, it still fits with our understanding of Brahman and that we are all
Correct.
part of the divinity.
Moving on, the next statement is about religion and menstruation.
Because, most of the times in Hinduism, when the women are unclean during certain days, they're not allowed into the holy sanctuaries, the temples, etc., etc. Even Islam follows that, I suppose.
Especially female conversion stories uh, often have this accusation that as a Hindu, she was not allowed to perform puja or go to the mandir during her periods. Now, I want to ask you, who is it that is allowing or disallowing a woman from doing their puja during their periods? There's nothing like somebody is policing these women. Now, isn't that a thing of conviction that a woman refrains from going to a mandir or entering the puja room at home? Or is it somebody standing at the entrance of every mandir and asking every woman that's entering it if she's having her periods? Is that how it's done?
No, not at all. Not at all. Like you say, it's absurd to think of a notion of policing over here that is happening over here, as opposed to the devotee exercising self-restraint on certain aspects of how they choose to practice their sadhana, how they wish to practice their bhakti in certain times, and so on. So this notion of ritual impurity, this is there in the history of religions. If you take a look at various religions, for example, if you take Judaism, Judaism also saw menstruating women as ritually unclean. During the period of when they had their periods, you were not supposed to have relations with them. And they were seen that women will become clean after they have the ritual bath. In fact, it talks in Torah or Leviticus also, which says that whoever touches a menstruating woman also becomes unclean, impure, until at least the end of the day. By evening, they become pure again. And we see that the same ideas entered into early Christianity because they followed the old law. Old law was Judaism. They followed that. And we find that even today, the Orthodox Church is following Judaic laws on unclean menstruating women. Some of the sects of Christianity, they have had a lot of discussions during their early history. If you look at the founding fathers and what they discussed about, do we uphold the old law or do we reject the old law in terms of these things? There have been a lot of discussions. It is not as if Jesus came and said that, all right, menstruating women, you can pray to me. There's no such thing. It is an opinion by some founding fathers on what Christ would have been and whether he overturned the old law, which is again, Bible has got some contradictory statements on these things in some places. So whether to uphold or discard old law is one of those things that Orthodox Church does, and some other sects of Christianity follow some precedents set by founding fathers. These are opinions. And in Islam also we see similarly that there is ritual impurity, that after the woman has a bath, she's no longer impure. But Islam says women can do their prayers and other things, in contrast to Judaism and Orthodox Christianity. What about Hinduism? What does Hinduism say? Well, like I said, there are prescriptions for life. There are prescriptions for life, and the prescriptions come in the Dharma Sutras. Now, the Dharma Shastras say that the woman has got about 3 days worth of ritual impurity, which can be cleansed with a ritual bath. And during this time, historically, culturally, and practically in India, it has been seen that women take a period of rest. It's a time for austerity. It's a time for self-purification. It's a time for many regenerations, if you will. And also, because Hinduism is not a monolith saying that thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that, among the rich cultural practices of Hinduism also have been the Shakti worship. Menstruation is worshipped in Shakti tradition. There are temples in India that are devoted to the goddess in the menstruating phase because that was seen as an important portion for procreation, for life. It was seen, observed, understood, and celebrated. There is no shame attached with it, and there is no what is called as ritual impurity attached with it. So this translation is something that we should be careful about. It is not talking about impurity as such, but these are recommendations. One of my Facebook friends, Nitin Sridhar, He's written a book on menstruation, and that covers a lot of this myths about menstruation, myths in Hinduism. And I recommend people to read that book. So the
I
flow
think
of blood.
even Sinu Joseph has written something on this, right?
Yes, 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 yes. Sorry, I forgot to mention Sinu Joseph too. I've seen several of her talks on this topic. Yes, both Sinu Joseph as well as Nitin Sridhar have done excellent work on removing some of this mythology, some of these deracinating narratives around menstruation. So people can read that and see what it is. So, like I said, Dharma Shastras are not set in stone. These are not, you shall do this, you shall not do that. These are cultural practices that are there with the idea that it's a time for women to rest, regenerate, practice austerity, and so on. In some philosophical ideas, we might have that the flow of blood in a woman is more of Rajasic, and during Rajasic phase, maybe you're mentally not in a sattvic state of mind. Whenever we go for prayers, whenever we go to a temple, pilgrimage, we are in a sattvic state of mind, sattvika. So remember, there are three gunas: sattvika guna, rajasic guna, tamasic guna. So the sattvika is what we are after when we do these prayers, meditation, and so on. So there are some people who interpret this as during the Rajasic phase, heightened Rajasic phase, maybe it's not conducive towards doing a Sattvika. Doesn't mean the woman should not do that. I mean, we know that even in warriors in India, take the example of Shivaji. Shivaji's battle cry was Jai Bhavani. He'd take a sword, Jai Bhavani, and go and kill. Just because he's calling out the goddess and praying to Jai Bhavani doesn't mean that he did not do a Rajasic deed like ridding his kingdom of these terrorists. He did not do that. He saw it perfectly as a dharmic activity. So, other words, there are historical precedents. There are cultural practices like Shakti temples in menstruation. There are Dharma Sutras that talk about these things. These are all the rich tapestry of ideas in Hinduism regarding menstruation. There is no one Torah, Leviticus, the law saying this such this shall be done. There is no some statement that is upheld in Christianity, Islam, and these kind of things. These are practices that one chooses depending on one's spiritual evolution and understanding. That is the best way that we can take a look at cultural practices. So to leave Hinduism just because a woman was called impure during menstruation is ridiculous. Hinduism is something that celebrates life, that celebrates our role in the natural order of things. What can be more natural than a woman undergoing periods? This is the part of connection, part of life, in the circle of life. Our rishis understood it, we have understood it, we are all part of Brahman. So where is the question of impure Brahman and pure Brahman? There is no such thing.
And because of menstruation, there is progeny, and progeny is celebrated in Hinduism, unlike in Christianity, which is thought to be a curse.
Exactly, that you're born in sin over there, original sin, there's no such thing.
And also the very act of the act of progeny is because of a curse, right? Eve, a woman has to go ahead and bear the labor pains because Eve sinned.
Right. So there is no cultural, philosophical baggage in Hinduism regarding any of these things. So Hinduism has sought to understand our role in the universe, how do we fit in, about the natural order, and it has celebrated life. It has celebrated all of these things. People who don't understand this are filled with difference anxiety because of what the missionaries told them or what they think they should behave as. And they're the ones who are the forefront of calling out all these tropes, if you will, about menstruation, illegal practices, and or the forbidden practices, and these kinds of things. Ridiculous.
Right. A menstruating woman can utter the name of her deity, of gods and goddesses in her mind.
Absolutely. Let me give one more example, Esther. And this is a recent example, what happened in Sabrimala, right? The Supreme Court that came out in Sabrimala and what has to be done over there and so on. And what was the issue over there? The issue was that in Sabrimala, the Devta over there, Ayyappa, because of the cultural notions and his understanding, was that women who are in that fertile period will not visit him in his temple over there. during a certain time, when the pilgrimage is undertaken to Sabrimala. So this has been the understanding for the longest time and the practice over there. This is repositioned as a feminism, anti-feminism kind of battle. And the Supreme Court weighed in and started saying certain things about what Sabrimala you can do and you cannot do. So this is an example where the women in Kerala, they came out in the streets saying the Supreme Court judgment is incorrect. They should not do that. Supreme Court is trying to say they were protecting the interests of the women, and in a bizarre sense, the women were protesting, saying, no, this is the practice that we want. This is what we respect. This is the culture that is there. This is not a discrimination against us. We understand perfectly well how the notions, ideas, practices of Sabrimala fit in with the entire population. They welcome the idea that for 40 days, their men are on a disciplined path and refraining from gambling or from drinking or eating meat and other such things. Every morning praying and doing certain things they welcome this opportunity for building one's moral strength. So we are left with this situation today where a deracinated judiciary, deracinated media comes and positions every cultural practice of Hinduism as retrogressive, as opposing it in terms of conflict dynamics like feminism, anti-feminism, and so on. However, a deep understanding of Hinduism will show that none of these notions are true. None of these notions are true. There is nothing anti-feminism in Hinduism. It's welcoming. The Shakti worship welcomes every form of women worship and so on. There are cultural practices that we need to understand and follow. There is no injunctions. Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt do this. No such thing. It is a set of recommendations and practices. And when we honor and follow these cultural practices and respect the sanctity of these various practices, we are following a cultural tradition set for a very long time. There is no discrimination here.
So the next thing is something that I've heard several times during testimonies like this.
And above all, I had a surprising news that I can worship this God however I am, wherever I am, in whichever form I am, like whether I am clean or not physically.
That Christianity gives one the luxury of going to church, or even luxury to open their Bible early in the morning or kneel down in prayer without a shower or even personal hygiene. So I don't know how true that is about Christianity, but I only know of Christians that went to church only after a shower. Yes, there are. As a Christian, you would want to finish your the ritualistic Bible reading session early in the morning and get it out of the way before you jump into your chores for the day. So as soon as one wakes up, one opens the Bible, and in many cases, they open the Bible and read it. To find a verse for the day, the daily verse. So there are several ways of doing it, but yes, Christians do wake up, and several Christians, practicing Christians, do wake up early in the morning, open their Bible first thing in the morning, or kneel down in prayer first thing in the morning. So what this video says is, Hinduism does not allow you to do that. And that is also one of the reasons that people convert. Is there a restriction that you cannot utter the name of God as soon as you wake up in the morning, the first thing in the morning? Or you cannot read from a religious scripture, from a Hindu scripture, as soon as you wake up in the morning?
So once again, Esther, I continue to be baffled and bewildered by the amount of atrocity literature out there talking utter rubbish about Hindu practices, Hindu ideas, and positioning them vis-a-vis the Abrahamic thought. It continues to amaze me. So to answer your question, no, there is no thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. That is basically what Abrahamic ideas are. The set in stone ideas and practices are Abrahamic. There is no such thing in Hinduism. Hinduism has got recommended practices, and our interpretation of Dharma as we go along, what do we understand? Every situation, contextual situation, calls you for understanding Dharma and so on. There are recommended practices. When we wake up early in the morning, what happens? So we are seeing, Hinduism believes that at any given time, the three gunas are the ones controlling our actions. What are the three gunas? Tamasic, which is more of a stupor quality, stupor and such things. Rajasic, which is more of an action-oriented principle. And Satvika, which is more of a noble and such kind of qualities. We understand that every action that we do through the course of the day is defined by these three gunas. These three gunas are the ones controlling every aspect of our thoughts, actions, deeds, every single thing. So when we are sleeping at night, we are in a tamasic state of mind. That is what allows us to sleep. That's what allows our body to regenerate. It is not as if tamas is bad. Tamas is good, because after that sleep, your body is regenerated, right? You're ready for some rajasic action, tamas, sattvic action, and so on. When you wake up, you're still in the tamasic state of mind. What could you do? I have several friends. The first thing, as soon as they wake up, they'll take a murti of Vigraha of Ganesha or Saraswati and touch it to their eyes, reverentially, saying that this is as dear to me as my eyes are, my sense objects are. And they utter a prayer and they also get up. Nobody has told them to not to do that. They do that before brushing their teeth or anything else. Yes, they do that. And the first thing that ritually Hindus do is you might first have your bath. When you have your bath, you're started from a tamasic state of mind. Rajasically, you're taking your bath. Then you purified your body, mind, and everything in order to go and pray to Bhagavan, your Ishtadevata, your Ishvara. You're done there to try and make this connection that I am beyond the body and mind. I am Brahman. To do that, to enter that state of mind is not easy. You cannot do it first thing when you get up from bed, unless, of course, you're a realized Atman like a yogi who does not need any of the crutches, right? He says, I see the star. I see the star directly. You don't, unless you're one of those people, then most often we would require some stages. Just like you can't start a cold engine in a winter day in the USA, at least the earlier days. Now with the new kind of engines, you can do that. You had to heat up the engine sufficiently before it'll start. So similarly, you can't get out of bed after an 8 hour or 7 hour sleep and start running a marathon immediately. No, you have to warm up. You warm up, stretch your muscles and other such things. Then you start jogging. Only then you can do that. So everything calls for preparation. The same thing with the mind. When you're going in the question could be asked, what is the use of the prayer? Why are you even praying? Why are you even doing that? I'm sure Christianity has got its reasons why they're praying, and Islam similarly, why they do 5 prayers. I'm sure they are very good reasons. In Hinduism, why are you even praying? Praying is one way of connecting with divinity, your Ishtadevata, trying to emulate the qualities, trying to be on the yamas and niyama, good thought, good words, good deeds. All of them in yoga, everything is marching towards a goal of trying to understand what Brahman is. Everything is geared towards that. So in order to do that, for most of us, when we wake up in the morning, we want to first wake up, brush, have a ritual bath. And once you do all those things, then you put your vibhuti or chandanam and other such things. Then perhaps you're ready. Some people even will do some Surya Namaskara. They'll do some yoga. They'll do other stretching, Rajasic kind of asanas, breathing pranayama and other such things. Then they are ready. Then they are ready for meditation. Then they do the meditation, because that might help them in their goal, spiritual goal. So this is Hinduism. You can choose a variety of practices over here depending upon your spiritual progress, depending on your calling, depending upon the ability that you have. So anything that you do towards this goal is noble. There is no injunction saying you shall not pray as soon as you get up from bed or any such thing. These are practices. These are practices set in the Dharma Shastras and other things so that people understand we are acting under the action of gunas. We need to make sure that we are in a sattvika state of mind when we undertake these noble ventures. We cannot directly enter sattvika state of mind. Most of us, unless you're a realized Atman, we have to go through a set of practices before we are ready for a sattvika activity. That is the best understanding I can give you.
So I want to compare, contrast this with what is said in rural churches. So in churches that are operated in slum areas for slum dwellers, I've heard pastors start their Sunday session, the worship session, with a lecture about showering before coming to the church. They even go to the extent to say that they're not allowed if they did not worship or are dressed neatly with combed hair and washed clothes, putting on washed clothes. They also say that God likes cleanliness and blesses only those that maintain personal hygiene. Now, isn't that policing?
It looks
Which
like
is
that.
absent in Hinduism,
It looks
right?
like that. It looks like that. And that reminds me of an anecdote, Esther. During my undergraduate days, I studied in a semi-rural college in Karnataka, and my roommate in the hostel was a very nice guy. I'm not going to tell his name, obviously, over here. Very, very nice guy. I had several roommates, by the way, so I won't tell you which one this is. So this guy was from rural Tamil Nadu, and he was a Christian convert. And he happened to come from some of the underprivileged backgrounds. He used to say that his pastor would come during the Sundays and things like that to their church on his motorcycle from some other small town and slap these boys around. Slap these boys around because they're not attending church or they're not looking clean enough and other such things. He would actually physically hurt them so that they will fall in line and obey. So such a kind of, I was shocked when I heard that, but I could understand, okay, he wants them all to follow into a discipline, a moral way of doing. These are all the
Right.
new converts to bring them in line with this. But I have not seen such a policing. I have not heard of any pujari anywhere doing any such thing. In fact, the opposite is true. If you, for example, read Nunes or I think it's Nunes. Nunes was a Portuguese traveler who came to the Vijayanagar kingdom. So he was talking about how the Raja, in this case, it was Ramaraya or Krishna Deva Raya, I forget which. During Navratri time, the king would give away the treasures from the kingdom. A portion of the treasures will be distributed to the poor and so on. And he says on that day, huge crowds had gathered outside the palace. And he's saying that the most unruly were the Brahmins, the poor beggar Brahmins, such they were all there. And they were beaten to stand in line with the palace guards. The palace guards are actually beating them so that they will stay in line. So this gives you an idea that do pujaris police or do others police pujaris? History at least tells us that here is the case where this is how it was done in those days. Very, very poor, no way to exert control. So nobody is exerting any control on you to follow a certain way of doing things. We have seen the reverse. Historically, history of religion. If you go to the Roman Empire, after Constantine adopted Christianity, after Theodosius, his successor, came into power, a violent purging of the so-called pagan ideas was underway. Once the first council of Nicaea had canonized certain books, only those 4 books were allowed to be there in the Roman Empire. Possession of anything that was not canonized would be death penalty. Roman soldiers would go and bash in the doors of the people and go and search. Do you have that book? If you have any forbidden books, you'd be killed. The books would be burnt, you'd be killed. So such a policing has been done, we know, in the growth of Christianity. And I don't even have to say about the growth of Islam. We know that was done through severe policing and practice of what they call blasphemy laws and these kind of things. We have never seen that. Never, never, ever in any aspect of the history of Hinduism. We have never seen such policing anywhere.
In fact, inflexibility or lack of freedom in practicing one's faith is what defines Christianity.
True.
Thou shalt not do this is what defines Christianity. That is exactly what Christianity is all about. And it should be, and thou shalt do this only like this.
True. So it is adherence to the divine, the so-called divine dictated law. It is adherence to that determines what they call salvation, meaning admission to their heaven, or rejection and thrown into eternity, hell, and these kind of things. So it's adherence to the law rather than understanding your purpose in life. The only purpose you have is this one. This knowledge and other things are not part of this picture. Only blind for observance of the law will assure you a place in that philosophy in heaven.
Absolutely, yes.